good. Okay. We have many photographs from this last 3 years of growing all these pollinator patches. And the most logical approach I felt was to take us through the year almost by season or by date, which enables, if you want to take notes, one of the main things that we're trying to achieve is as long a period of plants that are appropriate for feeding our pollinators, so that we give the enablers of the maximum benefit. So starting as early in the year, providing nectar producing plants is very important, and carrying it all the way through to the end of the year. One of the key things that I wanted to mention that we were really trying to do is what Stephen mentioned before. We were selecting plants both as host plants, which are the ones that the caterpillars need to feed on, and also the butterflies need to lay their eggs on. So, and that's particularly important. We need to provide native plants that are appropriate to the species of butterflies that we see here on the North Shore. So we're trying to select the host plants that relate specifically to the butterflies that we want to either attract or that we do see here. Then the nectar plants can be much broader. You can have native nectar providing plants, but also you can go and add plants that are similar to the native species, but that are slightly different, that produce, might bloom for longer and produce nectar as well. And also many of the bred plants have longer seasons, so you can extend the time of nectar provision. The other thing that is fairly crucial for a butterfly and pollinator garden is to provide some shelter. If a site is particularly windy and buffeted by traffic, for instance, that even though you would see, for instance, swathes of wildflowers on the verges of highways, you won't see many butterflies in particular, because the air is just too, they're pushed around too much, and it's not still enough. And then the third thing that we look, the fourth thing that we look to provide is some water source, and also some areas of bare soil for mudding and minerals, provision of minerals. So if I go through the year, the plants going by the season and through the year, then we'll look at what we can see. So, yeah. So here, my earliest planting is snowdrops. Obviously, they are not a native species, but they do provide early nectar, and this is 21st of February, and we have honeybees at work already. Steve? Yeah. It's not moving on. Oh no, there, I got it. Heathers, the winter flowering heathers are also a particularly important nectar source. They're not a native host plant, but they do provide nectar for bees that come out of hibernation early, the native single solitary bees. And so looking at winter blooming heather, you can choose different varieties and species that extend the flowering period. So you can get some that bloom through November, December, and January, and then continuing from January, February, March. And those are all winter blooming heathers. The key thing when you're buying heather as looking at it for a pollinator plant is not to buy the bud heathers, where the blooms don't actually open, and therefore they last a very long time, but they don't open, therefore they're pretty useless plant for pollinators. Another early plant, we're looking at March, another not truly native plant, but the common meadow violet that often invades our lawns. It can be white or blue, and that's also a good early pollinator plant. in our lane, we just happen to have our Shasta daisies out there prior to becoming a pollinator patch. And we had leftover bulbs. And so we do have a river of blue hyacinth that provides a lot of pleasure. And this is the 6th of April. So although the tulips and other early bulbs are not necessarily the best, the lane wasn't exactly a place where we would be putting precious trilliums out. But there are native bulbs, and I am hoping to introduce erythronium, the fawn lilies, and so on, to the shadier patches. Brunnera is another, or I think you call it giant forget-me-not, or Brunnera. It's a great early plant for early bees if they arrive. And those silver leaves you saw in one of Stephen's photographs, that's a Brunnera. And this early bloom is important. Another early bloomer that Anne has provided is the leopard's bane. And it's an early composite-y, a daisy flower, great flat, like a flat landing pad, great for pollinators. Again, it's not a native. We found particularly another early plant, wallflowers of all kinds have been great for extending the bloom season and providing very consistent bloom for early pollinators. And we use these ordinary garden wallflowers, which are usually biennials, but we are finding that they return. If you trim the dead heads, save the seeds, they do return. But the perennial purple wallflower is particularly successful for our pollinators. And you can see where Carolyn has provided a tray of water at the back of that photograph as a drinking area. On Joe's bank, we did work a lot with biennials because we seeded, it's over 100 feet. And in terms of cost, it's quite expensive to plant up hundreds and hundreds of feet. And so we did sow biennials, and we have a bank of white foxgloves, which the bees absolutely love. And we get many different kinds of bumblebees in them in particular. And I follow them with robascums, white robascums, that continue the theme of the white spires on that bank. And it's become, people come visit it. When it's in bloom, people tell each other, and they come visit each year to see them. So 100 feet of white foxgloves is quite a sight. As you can see, there's two different kinds of bumblebees there. I'm not great on bumblebees. I've only just started learning about them, and I haven't found myself a bumblebee person who can help train me. I really want to spend a day with somebody who's into bumblebees and figure out all the different species. I do know that the largest one that we see, I think, is called the Nevada bumblebee. And it's huge. It's about nearly 2 centimeters long, and it's quite a sight when it buzzes around. Herbs are a particularly good source of nectar for pollinators, and also easy to grow and easy to supply. Many of the wildflowers and so on are harder to come by. You have to hunt them out. You have to go to specialist nurseries, and they're quite expensive. And you also have to grow from seed if you want to cover 100 feet of length of lane in a specific plant. Growing by seed has been really the most successful way, but that takes time. So chives is a wonderful early plant and is a really good replacement, easily available for the nodding onion, which is a really good host plant and nectar plant. And so if for a quick first year filler, chives are wonderful. They will self-seed. And if you then can get a nodding onion plant, harvest the seed and then grow them for the following year, then you can build up your stock. This is communal garden sage, culinary sage. The bees absolutely love it. It's also easily available and is a wonderful pollinator plant. Here's one of our most common, which I'm sure everybody has seen, the common cabbage white butterfly. And it's actually on a wallflower called Bowles mauve. And for length of flowering period, it's a fabulous plant for attracting all different kinds of butterflies and bees and hoverflies, because it blooms for such a long period of time. It is a brassica, and therefore, like a cabbage or broccoli, and therefore you will get cabbage whites, but in spring you will also get margined whites. The margined white butterfly too on that one. Here's a cabbage white gathering minerals. It's on a small patch of where I put down some fresh manure. They do like fresh manure, and you will find that they will come to the sandy soils and with patches of manure and other minerals that become available when you turn the soil over. So patches of bare soil are useful for the pollinators. This was one of the first butterflies that Stephen and I spotted in our 2018 when we first joined. And it's a little brown butterfly. It's not very big, about the length of your thumbnail. And the key thing, I think you can see my cursor. You can see those little tails there. And it's got little tails there and little white ends on it. And it's got this zigzag pattern. And you identify it as a hairstreak. It's a cedar hairstreak. And its host plant is our red cedar, our native red cedar. So it's not one that we can happily plant in the lane. So really, we would be providing nectar plants for the cedar hairstreak. It's a really nice little butterfly. We haven't seen many of it this year, but it is around. And because it's quite brown and small, they don't get photographed as often as the gaudy Western swallowtails and so on. So keep your eyes out for the small brown butterflies, which I think in the birding world are known as the LBJs, the little brown jobs. The little brown ones count too. This one is a painted lady. Again, it's in May. And what I have here, the plant underneath, you would find is supremely useful. It's actually a perennial candy tuft, Iberis. It is one called Iberis gibraltarica Betty Swainson. It's named after a lady called Betty. But the advantage of that is that unlike our Iberis that blooms just in the spring, it blooms right on into October and November. It blooms all summer. Fantastic landing pad for all kinds of butterflies. It too is a brassica, so therefore cabbage whites are attracted as well. Here again is the painted lady butterfly on lavender. And if you note, to identify the painted lady versus our wonderful West Coast lady, which is a rarity, and we're always on the hunt for her. And she has a lovely name, Vanessa Annabella, and for Latin, that's a very easy one to remember, Anse. The difference is that with the painted lady, you can see that where my cursor is, you can see that white patch there. In the West Coast lady, which is the one that is really close to our heart and we want to attract, that is a sort of buff color as opposed to white, buff to orange. This is a Western tiger swallowtail on lavender. Lavender is another herb supremely useful as for attracting pollinators. And if you have French and Spanish lavender as well as English lavender, you will spread the season. So you can extend your nectar producing season with the lavenders over a much wider range if you get the types of lavender that have little bunny ears at the top, which are known as French or Spanish lavender. And they flower earlier than English lavender. And then the English lavender comes along, and then you get the Spanish lavender reblooming. And if you deadhead, sometimes some of the English lavenders will rebloom again later. So extending the season, the different lavenders, go for different ones, not all the same, and you will get more nectar production. Bees on the lavender, loving it. This is again a painted lady in mid-June. And this is on Sweet William. We did find that Sweet Williams or dianthus are very, very good nectar attractants. And they're not a host plant, but they do pull in the butterflies. And to actually, again, the butterflies land on this plant and stay still long enough for you to be able to identify and see them and photograph them. And they also bloom for a very long period of time. You can get up to 6 weeks at least on the dianthus. And if you deadhead them, they will rebloom as well. So longer nectar production. We like to do as many composite or daisy type plants, and this is simply a feverfew. Again, this is in, I think in June, and you can see I still have this perennial candy tuft blooming, and now we have the feverfew mixed with it. They're not the natives, and I will be coming to native plants some more, but I'm just going to wallop through these ones because they extend the season, and that is an enormous help for nectar production. This is our little Essex Skipper. It's very commonplace here now, but it's not a native species. As the name denotes, it's Essex Skipper. It comes from Europe, and we saw these out towards Hope. The interesting thing about this is you'll see that little purple vetch type plant that's behind it. That's also now very much spread across BC, but it's not a native plant either. So it's very hard to actually clearly draw the line between native plants and non-native because there's such an extent of not invasive ones, but ones that have kind of established here gently. This is a small Echo Azure on thimbleberry. The thimbleberry is actually the parviflorus, Rubus parviflorus. And when it opens its wings, it's that beautiful blue. So if you saw that rock that was painted in the lane, when it opens its wings, it's the beautiful blue inside. The female has more dark markings on it and more shadings of dark around the edges. And yet both of them, when they're closed, they don't look like a blue butterfly at all. They are quite small, about this length of your thumbnail again, and they flit very quickly. So getting a photograph is quite challenging, especially with their size. I was talking about continuing the availability of nectar in biennials, and these are the verbascums, which I've mixed with the lavenders on Joe's Bank. So when you drive down Bournemouth Crescent, it's a bit past now, but in June and July, you would be seeing that. Again, another not native plant, but supremely useful for long, long, long blooming times, and a good attractant because of the height is the Verbena bonariensis. This is also known as purple top vervain. It again is a bit of a self-seeder, but it's very gentle and not competitive. It doesn't outcompete other plants. So it's a great one for kind of weaving in as a seeder between other plants. You can get it growing and achieve quite a large volume quickly, and you can get height, which a lot of the insects like to be able to find things. They can see it better if you have a swathe of plants of similar type. And also with a bit of height, some of the bigger butterflies like to see that. In our area, Stephen's and my section of the lane, we had Shasta daisies for a long time. And I know that the oxeye daisy is considered in places an invasive alien. And, you know, every now you sort of learn about a new plant that you shouldn't have. And the Shastas have proved such a good landing pad and so popular with our butterflies in the lane that we've kept this stretch, but we've not planted them anywhere else in the lane. So we're limiting them just to this stretch to ensure that we provide better and wider planting, but they do attract the butterflies. You can see the cedar hairstreak. You can see a little more clearly there, the tails at the back of the cedar hairstreak. It is particularly it gives you a scale. You can see it's about the size of your thumb. And they do love the Shasta daisies as well. Here is our West Coast lady, which we saw for the first time last year. We were absolutely thrilled to see it. It doesn't arrive very often. And if I bring my cursor there, you can see I showed you the painted lady is very similar. But here you can see that that's the pale orange rather than the white. And that's the defining identification feature to tell you that you spotted our wonderful Vanessa Annabella instead of a painted lady. There it is a little bit closer. Again, you can see that that area would be white on a painted lady, and here it is that orangey buff color. That's the underside of the painted lady, the ventral side of the wings. And again, on the Shastas, they seem to provide a very good platform for photography. So I would keep a few in a butterfly garden simply for that reason alone. But you can see that patch is quite clearly a buff color, and that's our West Coast lady butterfly. There, just for comparison, you can see that's the painted lady. I apologize, it's not quite so focused, but if you look at that patch on near the end of the wing, you have the white spots and then the white mark, and that's not the tawny orangey color. So therefore, this is the painted lady. And they the first ones, you'll see them fairly early because they migrate up in the spring from California, and they arrive looking quite pale and tattered. So the butterflies can look quite different early in the year if they've migrated versus if they have been born and they're fresh and new and their colors are pristine and sharp and clear. The migrants look particularly sad for themselves, but they lay the eggs that will form the next generation that you will see in the summer here, that come up in late June, July time. That's the underside of the painted lady. Again, that patch you can see is particularly white. So same colors. If you see it on a Shasta daisy and you see white spots and a white bit there, you know you're looking at a painted lady, even if you haven't seen the wings open. Here, just over the fence in our yard itself, a pale swallowtail. It's just landed on a burning bush. And this we saw in mid-July. And the most interesting thing about the swallowtails is they're considered the Olympic athletes of the butterflies. You have to be prepared to put your running shoes on and sprint to get a photograph. Occasionally they land, but usually you're on the run to catch them. These, like trees like cherry and willow and their host plants, are small, medium scrubby trees. So areas of scrubby willow and the woodland edge planting, which you see, for instance, just outside our wild bird sanctuary on the other side of the road, are crucial as host plants for the pale swallowtail. Again, here we grew, for Sharon's garden, we grew native plants of goldenrod and Douglas aster. Goldenrod is particularly good for late season planting, and there you can see it with echinacea in the orange flower, that plate-like composites of daisy flower, which makes a good landing pad, and the blue salvia, which again is a very long blooming salvia. I think it's black and blue, but it's a great nectar plant for a long period of time. Not only just thinking of extending nectar through the season, but also through the day. The evening primroses come out late in the day, and I know they are not native, but in Sharon's patch, this almost arrived by accident. We don't know where it came from, but we've kept a small patch of evening primrose to provide very late blooms in the day for nectars, for pollinators who are seeking nectar. Again, providing flowers is also a question of management. And I carefully saved this hawkweed, which again, I think is in a European colonial plant. It's not a native, this one's not a native, but many of the weeds that have taken advantage of disturbed land and roadsides do often end up being European introductions. This hawkweed, I carefully got everybody mowing around it until, since everybody shares mowing the Butterfly lane, one day somebody thought, and weed whacked it down, not realizing I was saving it, even though it was outside the actual plant bed, because we encourage in our gravel areas lots of weedy plants, because the butterflies and the local pollinators really do like many of these slightly plants that take advantage of the disturbed ground. Okay. Another annual that is a good filler for a starter butterflyway patch is honeywort, or something called cerinthe. It's particularly good for bumblebees and all the native solitary bees. And in addition, growing patches of annuals allows you to have bare soil in the winter, especially on sunny banks. Bare areas of sandy soil are crucial for the solitary bees to be able to make their homes in the ground. So covering every inch is not the best idea, and circulating by growing annuals in a butterfly pollinator patch actually allows you to have areas of bare soil in the winter. You don't want to mulch everything, because they need the sandy bare soil for their nests and their hibernating. Another plant we've really tried to grow this year has been, not just this year, but last year, we've been concentrating on hollyhocks and malva, because the West Coast lady particularly likes, as a host plant, our hollyhock. I know it's not a native plant, and this is another perennial. Hollyhocks tend to be more biennial. This is listed as a perennial malva, so the Malvaceae plants, and it's called Windsor Castle, and it's now about 8 to 9 feet tall, and is proved very successful. Grown from seed just this spring, you can go from nothing to swathes of tall nectar-producing flowers at 8 and 9 feet high fairly quickly, choosing the right plant to grow. So this is a malva called Windsor Castle. We do try and grow milkweeds, despite the fact that it's very, very, very unlikely that we will see a monarch butterfly. The Western monarchs are in severe decline, and part of it is the habitats in California. This is the Asclepias tuberosa, just butterfly weed, I think it's called commonly. This is mid-July. It's not reliably repeating in our North Vancouver gardens, although I suspect elsewhere it might be better. This has survived 3 years now, and it's doing quite well. And just behind it, I have an aster. That's Aster latifolius, which is a small single-flowered aster that actually provides a different timing and different flower shape than many of the fall asters, in order to provide a variety of nectar sources. Both of those are perennials. Phlox, extremely useful as a pollinator nectar source plant. The monada, or bee balm, or bergamot, as you may know it, if you drink Earl Grey tea, this is your bergamot. It's also considered a herb, but this bee balm can get up to 5-6 feet tall, and is absolutely wonderful for hummingbirds and bees, obviously, but the hummingbirds in particular have brought us, this plant has brought us enormous joy with the hummingbirds, and combined with salvias, such as hot lip salvia, Carolyn's garden has been a hummingbird magnet, and we have several families of hummingbirds in the lane, and they do provide a lot of joy to everybody, especially in the early evenings. They're particularly active. I do try and grow some native annuals, and this is Farewell to Spring, known as Clarkia amina. I get most of my native flower seeds from Saanich native plants or Saanich native seeds on the island. And this is one of the packets they sent me for the Clarkia ammonia. It's just Farewell to Spring. So this is mid-July. It's blooming along with the lavender, but it's a native that you can grow as an annual to get a lot of flower cover quickly. We also grow a lot of yarrow. This is not the native yarrow, but a perennial called red velvet. In the back of the photograph, and all the yarrows are useful, whether you buy moonshine or the terracotta colors or red velvet. The native yarrow is best, but it's not very resilient for standing up, and it's not very competitive if you're growing a lot of other plants. So if you're trying to push more plants together, then getting a yarrow or achillea that is a non-native, you might have more success with it blooming for a long period of time and actually competing on an even playing field with some of your other plants. In front, we have calendula or pot marigold or English marigold, it's often known as. Very quick annual seed. You can get wide coverage of color and flowers quickly for pollinators using calendula. The great thing about that is also great to plant with kids and grandchildren because the seeds are funny little crescents and they're quite easy to handle and big. They reliably germinate and come up and survive in a huge range of conditions and continue on into the winter. So as an annual to fill a pollinator bed where you've got lots of gaps, a wonderful plant. Hot lips sage has proved a really great plant it's what I'd call a subshrub. These sages go right on into October and up until frost and have come back reliably for 3 years. I know they're quite a short-lived subshrub or perennial, and the key thing about them is not to prune them until spring. If you prune them and tidy them up in the fall, you're likely to kill them. And they need a very sunny position, but for hummingbirds and bees and hoverflies, fantastic. Another herb, marjoram.
Time check, sorry.
Yeah.
Because you go this with butterflies.
Oh,
Signs
yes.
as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
we didn't go into
Yeah,
that. Okay. I'll go through the signs as well. So I'm going to be a little quicker because I'm talking too much. Another herb, marjoram. Great for bees. I would go for the ornamental ordinary marjoram that has purple flowers and longer stems and it's longer blooming. Not ones like Kent Beauty, which are not as effective as the more ordinary marjorams that you can buy, culinary ones. Pearly Everlasting was another plant we grew from seed. We had 1 or 2 plants donated from the David Suzuki Foundation, and I gathered seed, and we grew many, many, many more, and now they're spread in a lot of places through the lane. They're a wonderful host and nectar plant. So they are a really good plant because they provide nectar and act as a host for several species. And it's one of the few that does several species. So it's worth putting into every pollinator garden. I've started this year to look at thistles because the painted lady in particular likes thistles, particularly the Canada thistle. This is bull thistle that accidentally seeded itself in my yard. I'm appalled at the amount of seed it sheds everywhere. So although I'm growing it, I'm only allowing the seed heads not to shed their seed because I do not want bull thistles through the whole garden. They are brutal to handle and pass by, but I want to experiment and see how I can grow thistles because that's particularly what the painted lady likes. Again, hollyhocks, we grew hollyhocks as host plant for the West Coast lady. because although it's not a native, it is a proven good host plant. Montbretia gives us blooms into July and August, Crocosmia, which you will know. There's many different varieties now that can give you different bloom times and extend the bloom time. Bees and the bumblebees absolutely love it, and it's worth growing, and especially the tall Lucifer, Montbretia or Crocosmia, called Lucifer, is great for hummingbirds. They also love it. This is a sedum or stone crop called Spathifolium. It's a host plant for the moss elfin butterfly. And here it's growing over a rocky boulder and down a slope, part shade, part sun, but it's so free draining and so dry that it's doing really well. It's a little stone crop. I'm hoping that maybe having this kind of extensive patch that's not in our lane, but growing an extensive patch, we might see some elfin butterflies come to the lane. So I'm looking to try and get the elfin butterfly, and this is its host plant. Borage, a good, easy annual seed plant you can grow from seed, is great for bees and encouraging pollinators if you need to fill space and have a longer season. Anise hyssop has been proven in research as well to be one of the most fundamentally attractive plants to bees and bumblebees. And this is one I think called Blue Fortune. There's one Anise hyssop that is the most resilient that will grow well on the North Shore. Highly recommend it as big patches of 4 to 5 foot plants for bees and butterflies. Here I've grown Anise hyssop again, but a gold leaf formed. I like things to look nice too. So we've got an echinacea that's particularly long blooming. I've weeded out some of the other ones. The red echinacea is also known as coneflower, and the seed heads are particularly good for the seed-eating birds in the fall. And so I've got my Anise hyssop, which is coming through July, and into August and September I have the sedum, which is a particularly attractive plant for butterflies. And so I'm extending the season. I'm moving from my echinacea and my hyssops into my sedums as I head into fall. So this sedum I think is Autumn Joy. One I particularly like is called Neon because it's very upright and with quite a strong color. And I find that the stronger reddy pink colors seem to attract more pollinators and more butterflies. We did grow a lot of seeds of wildflower seed packets and got a wide range of seeds. And this is one of the little annual larkspurs that I've taken to saving the seed and regrowing each year. So I save the seeds and keep growing it, and it's in a sort of wildflower pollinator seed packet. I haven't seen many. I see bees on it all the time and honeybees. I haven't seen any butterflies land on it. But again, it's quick and easy as an annual, as a filler. And particularly interesting in this photograph, just behind it, you can see a very large clover type plant. It's white sweet clover that can get as high as 7 to 8 feet. And it's particularly attractive to bees and hoverflies and pollinators. But it's, again, a European plant, and it's been grown as alfalfa or forage, as a forage plant. And it's an escape, and it grows everywhere now, almost as a wild plant. And the clovers are a particularly good group to grow for attracting butterflies. We grew a lot of Douglas aster from seed, which is our native aster. And we get blooms from July into November. And we've been experimenting with what I call the Chelsea chop, which is a very European term, where in May, we hack down half of them by 1/3, which delays their blooming so that we have the first lot bloom at like 4.5 feet high and early, and then the next lot bloom with slightly smaller flowers and lower down, but later. So by the way you manage the plant even though they're a native plant, you can extend the blooming season and therefore the availability of nectar. This is one section of the lane, Sharon's section of the lane. We particularly concentrated on trying to grow 100 feet of fennel. The reason, another herb, these herbs keep popping up, very useful for all the pollinators. We're growing fennel because it is a host plant and an attractant to the Anise Swallowtail butterfly, and that is a particular swallowtail that we haven't seen for in the lane at all. But Dr. Beard at the Wild Bird Sanctuary on Dollarton Highway is growing other of the native host plants to attract it, to try and bring it back to the North Shore where it used to be common. And the fennel is a great host plant, and we have also introduced a native cow parsnip, but we're not putting it in the lane because it has, like all the giant hogweed and heracleums, it has the ability to irritate skin. So we're having to put it where it is inaccessible and children and visitors won't touch it. Rudbeckia, another great pollinator for late, pollinator plant for late in the season. Nice open form, black-eyed Susan, commonly known as. Here it's mixed with fennel, a white phlox called David's phlox, and also the side of ocean spray. Throughout the lane, we've tried to plant every 10 to 15 feet a native host plant of shrub form. So ocean spray, red flowering currant, our native mock orange. So we're supporting our nectar plants with a structure and format of repeating host shrubs that provide host plants for the caterpillars. They've been only in for a year, so we've not seen much result yet, but they're just establishing, and we're hoping that we will get much more use of them by caterpillars and as a host plant, as opposed to just coming in to feed. Again, more cabbage whites on the long-lasting perennial wallflower, and you're now looking at mid-August. So this perennial wallflower has been going from May, flowering continuously all the way through to August. Very useful plant. Again, the bees like it too. This is Joe Pyeweed, particularly the flies, hover flies, and bees like the Joe Pyeweed. We only have one plant, and you can get it very tall so butterflies can find it. I also like to introduce a few of these single bloom dahlias because the bees love them. This one is a little one called Low Blush, and it's a great single open flower, and it's very, very flowers very, very well, and many, many blooms. So it's great for pollinators. And late in the season, again, you're extending the nectar producing season. Salvias and cosmos, again. We grow a lot of runner beans because the red blooms are particularly liked by hummingbirds. So we tend to grow a lot of runner beans through the lane and up the fences wherever we can squeeze them in, and sunflowers. Another salvia called radio red, particularly liked by hummingbirds. Dill, annual dill, is just as much of an attractant to the Anise Swallowtail butterfly. So we grow that as well, and it's quick. So if you can't grow these umbellifer type plants quickly, like fennel, you don't have many available, you can grow dill from seed very quickly and have a big area established. Again, one of the borders, marigolds, native Douglas aster sunflowers. This is my attempt to grow milkweed, and I've only so far, from one whole packet of seed, got one plant of this Asclepias speciosa. So it's just the showy milkweed. It's there for the one and only monarch, if it appears ever in our lane, the beautiful monarch butterfly. Late blooms, again, this is heading into November, sedum and hardy fuchsias. The hardy fuchsia, absolutely great as a food source for the migrating rufous hummingbirds. So late in the season, you want to feed the rufous on as they head through their migration. The hardy fuchsias are good. This is a not well-known plant, Hesperantha or river lily. It's South African, but this is actually the 2nd of November. So we've got open blooms that are useful for pollinators on the 2nd of November. And the salvias and marigolds, again, 2nd of November. So extending the pollinating season with pollinating nectar plants is great. Combine them with host plants, and then you should be providing a wonderful habitat for butterflies. Our future, we're really trying to attract this Anise Swallowtail. So I've been trying to grow Angelica, and one of them, and again, it's like the fennel. It's an attractant to this Anise Swallowtail, whose native plant that it likes is called Lomatium, and it's a particular Lomatium, and it smells of fennel. So the fennel and anise, you can tell by the name. I try and grow the Angelica. I found it did not grow well in the lane because it likes a rich garden soil and watering. So I've got it in our garden where it can receive better care, and hoping next year that we'll have 8-foot tall Angelicas for the swallowtail. The cow, Daucus carota, the Queen Anne's lace, roadside plant, often you find along the highways and roadsides. Again, a great source of nectar and good for the Anise swallowtail. And this is the cow parsnip that we received from Dr. Beard at the Wild Bird Sanctuary. It's, you can see in the background behind the foxgloves, it's in bloom, but it's in an area safe where people can't come into contact with it. And this is the elusive Anise swallowtail. It was seen just a few days ago in Campbell River. So we just want it to cross over the strait and come to see us too. So that's all the plants. What I can do now is I need to go into a few more of the butterflies that I didn't manage to cover while we were going through the plants because I didn't get photographs of all of them. If you have enough time, I can go in and look at a few more of the butterflies. Steve?
Yeah.
Can you come and help me switch to the other group of photographs? There's only 17, so it's not very many, and we can definitely try and finish by 9.
Okay.
That's fine.
Is that fine? Okay. Thank you.
If people have to go, they can go, but there's only 4 people have left by now.
Can you switch it over to the other one?
Yeah.
There we go. Thank you.
You should see the PowerPoint loading.
Okay. So the Anise swallowtail, there's only 16 or 17 of these, and these were the signs that we made. You can see the caterpillar food plants, carrot family, cow parsnip, desert parsley, which is the Lomatium, Angelicas. The Anise swallowtail differs from the western tiger swallowtail by having, if I get my cursor, you can see these black shoulders. If you can imagine a football player with big black shoulder pads on, that's the Anise swallowtail. The western tiger swallowtail does not have the black shoulder pads. So you should be able to see at a glance that it's not a western tiger, and you might have spotted this wonderful Anise simply by looking for the shoulder pads here and here. And if they're black, it's the Anise. Cabbage white, very common for everybody. It's the white has slightly black tips to the wings and black spots. The identifying features is the black spot here and here, and it'll tell you it's cabbage white. It's not native. Yeah, it's way too common for my comfort. California tortoiseshell is one of the things you see early in the spring, in sort of late April, May. This is a tattered migrant example. You can see has a beautiful sort of orangey background and the black markings on the dorsal side of the forewings here, here, and here. But it's an early one that you will see. Look out for it, you know, so in early May on warm days, especially when it's heading on towards, you know, 15, 16, 17 degrees, you might see it about, although they do come out in colder weather.
Yeah, it's one of the,
Go ahead.
it's one of the first butterflies that come out.
Yeah, it's startling to see such a beautiful one so early in the year. The Cedar Hairstreak, again, you saw that one, identifiable from the elfins by this funny little two tail things that it has. In the interior, it's the juniper hairstreak, slightly different, and its host plant is juniper, whereas this cedar hairstreak, the host plant is our red cedar. The Clodius Parnassian, Stephen and I have mainly seen on Mount Seymour. It likes the Pacific bleeding heart, the dicentra, and in our shade areas, we're trying to establish areas of swathes of dicentra as a food plant. There it's actually landed on a friend of ours' hand. And the interesting thing about the Clodius Parnassian is that the forewings are clear, they're transparent, and it's part of the group, I think, known as glass wings. Some are totally transparent, but the Clodius has just the forewings are transparent. Really neat butterfly. It's quite big, a bit bigger than the painted lady, I think. Echo Azure, now, or Celestrina echo. It used to be called the Spring Azure, and now really it's I think it's known as Echo Azure. It likes ocean spray in particular as a food plant. There it is with the wings closed, and as I said, when it opens, it's that lovely blue, flash of blue. It's very quick, and you have to be very quick to photograph it, and it's only, as I said, the size of your thumbnail. Essex Skipper, which is this European import again. I showed you this, you can see it on the vetch. These skippers are a more primitive form of butterfly. They're not, they almost look a little bit moth-like, but they have very cute faces with little sticky outy eyes, and they tend to fly fairly straight, so they don't flutter like a cabbage white butterfly. And occasionally when they're flying really quickly, you might think, oh, was that a bee? But it'll fly from plant to plant almost in a straight line and very quickly, and it doesn't sort of do a meandering flutter. So you can tell by its flight what the skippers are like. As host plants, they like a lot of the grasses, particularly the poa group of grasses. One of the reasons we're keeping areas of long grass in the lane and encouraging things like the vetches and clovers and long grass is to provide a habitat for particularly the skipper butterflies. Lorquins Admiral, again, it likes more tree type plants as its host plants, willow, poplar, chokecherry. Again, these are difficult to sometimes grow in pollinator gardens, but keeping woodland edge and scrubby areas of woodland is really crucial to providing host plants for butterflies. So not being too tidy and keeping the sort of scrubland of willow is something we should all try and achieve. And the Lorquins Admiral, very distinctive and beautiful. Tend to see quite a few of them also up in Lynn Valley, funnily enough, and the Mourning Cloak. Margined white, and this is our native white, loves brassicas, all the mustard family of plants, and arabis or rock cress in particular. The difference is it has no spots on it. It also has slightly more emphasized veining, but sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between the whites unless you actually can catch them. Mariposa Copper, we've mainly seen up Mount Seymour. It loves the pearly everlasting. Again, you can see it there on the pearly everlasting. Mourning Cloak, another early one you see. It's one of the earliest butterflies you can see. Most of the ones I've seen have also been up in Lynn Valley. Beautiful, it's so distinctive. You can't possibly mistake it for anything else here on the North Shore, for sure. Painted Lady, which I showed you in the photographs, its host plants, particularly the Canada thistle, the Cirsium species, and daisies. There it is again on the dianthus, the Sweet William. Pale Swallowtail, it likes cherry, crabapple, and tea bush, but trees and shrubs in Rosaceae and Rhamnaceae families. Again, we see it reasonably often, but it's not as common as the Western tiger swallowtail. And there you go. Although that looks a bit like a Western tiger. Anyway, I think that's phlox in the background. West Coast Lady, again, Vanessa Annabella. Again, on the Shasta daisy, we talked about that. Western tiger swallowtail. Again, caterpillar host plants, willow, poplar, birch, cherry, trees. We need the trees. The swallowtails particularly like to do mudding and gaining minerals from the ground. And near us, where there's a works yard, when it's quiet in late afternoon, early evening, we do find swallowtails mudding in the wheel ruts at the back of the works yard. It's adjacent to an area where there are willow and poplar. Oh, I think that's it for that. So thank you